the greatest act of love was letting go. A love that was born amid smiles, promises of eternity, and that seemed unbreakable. But can destiny erase what seemed eternal? We met in one of those moments that seemed to have been written by chance, but edited by destiny. Every smile we exchanged was like a shared secret, a silent promise that happiness had finally found us. I believed that. You believed it too. And together, we created a world where forever was more than a possibility. It was a certainty. You were my safe haven when the world outside seemed to be falling apart. His presence filled the empty spaces in me in a way I never knew was possible. You were the melody that made sense on silent days, the protagonist of my romance film, the person who taught me to see beauty even in what used to bother me. With you, things stopped being a burden and became part of me. I didn't just love you. I loved the person I became by your side. But life has a cruel way of testing what we hold most dear, and our love was no exception. Circumstances beyond our control began to challenge us. Responsibilities, commitments, and the pressures that each person carried became walls that were difficult to overcome. It was as if we were trying to row against a current that insisted on taking us in opposite directions. We tried, of course, and we tried again, but the cracks began to appear, small, almost imperceptible at first, but over time, they became irreparable cracks. The nights of conversation became shorter. The smiles became rarer. That sparkle in your eyes that used to be my lighthouse began to fade. Words that should have been said were swallowed by silence. Gestures that once said so much now seemed empty. And there, in the middle of it all, I felt something I never thought I would feel with you. Loneliness. The distance between us wasn't just physical. It was emotional. You were there, but it was like we were living in different dimensions, separated by something neither of us knew how to fix. The feeling was like I was watching our love wither away before my eyes, without being able to do anything to save it. And then you left. At that moment, the ground beneath my feet disappeared. My world collapsed into silence, and I was left there, lost in the rubble of everything we were. I tried to put the pieces together, but each attempt seemed futile. Tears became my most constant companions. The incessant questions echoed in my mind. Where did we go wrong? Could we have done something different? Why wasn't love enough? As time passed, something began to change. It wasn't immediate. There was no moment of epiphany. It was slow, like the blooming of a flower after winter. I realized that sometimes love is not enough. Not because there was a lack of feeling, but because, in some cases, two people simply have to follow different paths. And learning to accept that was one of the hardest lessons I've ever experienced. Letting you go was painful, but necessary. It was an act of love for both you and myself. Because at the end of the day, love shouldn't be a prison. It should be freedom, growth. And at that moment, I understood that our love had fulfilled the role it needed to fulfill. The pain was inevitable, but it was not permanent. She shaped me, transformed me, showed me a strength I didn't even know I had. I discovered that in order to truly love another person, I needed to learn to love myself first. I've I've discovered that sometimes letting go of what we most desire is the only way to find true peace. Today, memories of the two of us still arise. Sometimes they bring longing. Other times, a smile. You still occupy a special space, but you are like a distant star in the sky. Something that shines, but is already light years away. And that's fine. Our love was not in vain. He taught me the beauty of sharing life with someone, but also the importance of moving on when paths no longer cross. He was real, and that's enough. Now, I'm here, heartbroken, but full of hope, walking with uncertain steps, but confident that life still holds surprises. And who knows, one day I will find another smile, another hug, another love that makes me feel everything again. But for now, I walk alone, and it's okay like that, because sometimes to love is to let go. And in letting go, we discover that true love never completely disappears. It only transforms. What if the scars you carry were actually maps that point the way to your true essence? Because sometimes losing something that seemed indispensable is the only way to find yourself again. After you left, I found myself in a silent void, as if the world had lost all color. For weeks, maybe months, I tried to fill the space left by you with memories, with questions that had no answers, and with a longing that seemed to consume me completely. But there was something strange about this silence. He seemed to call me to something deeper, something that, at first, I didn't have the courage to face myself. How many times do we build our happiness on someone else's shoulders without realizing that we are forgetting ourselves? Looking back, I see that I had done just that. Not because the love we felt was wrong, but because, in the midst of our us, I lost myself from the I. And that was the first starting point for my new journey. At first, the loneliness was terrifying. Every corner of the house seemed to scream its absence. Every everyday detail seemed like a cruel reminder of what we had. The cup of coffee you loved, the movies we watched together, even the way we folded our clothes. Everything seemed infused with your presence. But it was in that same solitude that something surprising began to happen. I began to hear my own voice, and it was in that silence that I realized something important. I had never stopped to really get to know myself. What made me happy? What did I want for my future? Who was I before us? The answers did not come easily. In fact, there were days when these questions seemed to be even more painful than the longing. But little by little, I began to understand that, to move forward, I needed to learn to be okay with myself. Not as someone looking for a quick cure, but as someone who decides to rebuild something from scratch. That's when I started looking for little things that brought meaning. I went back to reading the books I always promised to finish. I went out for an aimless walk, just to feel the wind on my face and reconnect with the world outside. I started listening to songs that didn't remind me of you, but that reminded me of me. And then something magical happened. I rediscovered passions that had been buried by time. Things that previously seemed insignificant began to awaken a new brightness in my days. The painting I put aside, the dancing that made me feel alive, even the moments of silence. all of it began to fill the void in a way I never imagined possible. But don't think that this transformation was linear or painless. There were days when the shadow of what we were appeared with full force. I found myself revisiting old messages, reviewing photos that seemed to immortalize the happiness we once shared. And in those moments, the inevitable question arose: what if it had been different? And this is where the big dilemma arises. Could I have done more? Could it be that if you had fought a little harder, you would still be here? These questions haunted me, like ghosts that insisted on pulling me back to the past. But the truth is, no matter how painful it was, I knew I couldn't live with these doubts. Life is a constant flow, and I was beginning to understand that what we experienced, as intense and beautiful as it was, had fulfilled its purpose. It was real, it was true, but it was also finite. It was at this point that acceptance began to emerge, not as a surrender, but as a release. Accepting that the love we shared was enough while it lasted, but that it was now time to move on, was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. I realized that the act of letting go was not about forgetting, but about honoring what was, while making room for what could still be. And then, something changed inside me. I realized that every tear shed, every moment of pain, was transforming me into someone stronger, more aware, more whole. The woman I was becoming was not only a reflection of what I experienced, but also a reflection of what I chose to learn from it. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see someone who was reborn from the ashes of a love that, although it ended, left deep and beautiful marks. I see someone who still carries longing, but now understands that longing is not the enemy. She is just a reminder that at some point, something beautiful happened, and it is with this strength that I prepare for the next chapter of my life. I still don't know what the future holds. There are still uncertainties. There is still fear. But there is also hope. And that is more than enough to move forward. Because sometimes losing someone doesn't mean losing yourself. On the contrary, it's a chance to find yourself again and discover that, after all, the most important love we can have is the one we feel for ourselves. What if I told you that each ending carries within it the seed of a new beginning? That the pages that seem to close are, in fact, invitations to rewrite our history in ways we never imagined. Looking back, I realized that the end of our love was the beginning of something I would never have chosen on my own. The chance to rebuild myself. But rebuilding is never easy. It's a slow process, full of challenges, doubts, and that constant feeling that at any moment, everything could fall apart again. And yet, it is on this shaky ground that I discovered a surprising truth. Instability is where growth happens. After all, how can we learn to walk in a world that seems to be falling apart if we don't have the courage to take the first step? That's how I started looking for something that was bigger than the void left by his absence. Something that would not only fill the space, but help me expand it. I asked myself, what do I want to build from here? How can I turn the pain into something meaningful? This question took me to unexpected places. I went back to investing time in things I loved, but had been left behind. Writing, for example. The words, which before were just reflections of what we felt together, were now reflections of who I was becoming. Each sentence written was like a brick laid on a new foundation, the foundation of myself. But it wasn't just that. I decided to face old fears, like that course I always wanted to take, but never had time for. Or those trips I planned but put off, because there was always a reason to wait. After all, how much longer can we wait for the life we want to live? And it was at this point that something surprising happened. I began to realize that the world didn't stop when our love ended. It kept spinning, bringing new opportunities, new connections, new chances for happiness. I was so focused on looking back that I almost lost sight of everything that was opening up in front of me. But then the burning question arises: am I ready to love again? This doubt haunts me, because as much as I have learned to value my own company, as much as I have found strength and purpose in myself, there is a silent fear. Fear of giving myself in again, of lowering the barriers I built with so much effort. Fear that by opening my heart, I will end up returning to the same place of pain and emptiness. But at the same time, there is a growing curiosity. What if the next love is not a repetition of the past, but an evolution? What if, this time, love is built not on the need to fill gaps, but on the conscious choice to share who I am, whole, without fear? These questions still have no answers. But the simple fact of asking myself these questions is a sign that I'm ready to take the first steps. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Small, cautious, but intentional steps. Because at the end of the day, the biggest lesson I've learned from all of this is that love, whether for another person, the world, or myself, isn't something that happens all at once. It is a construction, a journey, a daily choice. And that's the choice I make now, choosing the new, the unexpected, the unknown, choosing to look forward, even if the memories still bring a pang of longing. Choosing to believe that no matter how beautiful the past was, the future can still be extraordinary, because the end of our love wasn't the end of me. It was just the starting point for a story I can't wait to write. What if the past, which you tried so hard to leave behind, came knocking on your door again? Would you have the courage to face it? Or would you choose to ignore the call? It was on an ordinary day, like so many others, that the unexpected happened. A ring on the cell phone, a familiar name lighting up the screen. For a moment, time seemed to stop, as if the universe was testing me. The message was short, almost casual, but it carried the weight of all the memories I thought I had overcome. Hi, how are you? How was I? It was a simple question, but it opened up a flood of emotions. My heart raced, my hands sweated, and for a moment, I was paralyzed between the desire to respond and the fear of opening a door that had taken so long to close. Why do some wounds never heal completely? I decided not to respond immediately. I took a deep breath and refocused on the things that were filling my life. But the truth is that that message had already created a small internal conflict, a crack in the wall I had built. Did the love we experienced still have space in the present? Or was this just a shadow of what it once was, trying to make itself relevant once again? However, the questions didn't stop. Why now? What did he mean with that message? Was it an apology, an attempt at reconnection, or just a meaningless fluke? The following days were a mixture of nostalgia and restlessness. I remembered the laughs, the moments when the world seemed to make sense just because we were together. But inevitably, the painful memories also surfaced. The unspoken words, the gaps that separated us, the weight of the choices that led us on different paths. And it was in this whirlwind of thoughts that an essential question arose. Am I really over it? Or have I just learned to live with absence? This doubt led me to revisit what I had learned about myself along this journey. What I discovered was comforting and, at the same time, challenging. Yes, I had grown up. Yes, I had found strength and purpose. But growth is not a final destination. It is an ongoing process. And perhaps this unexpected return was part of that process, a new test of my heart and my resilience. It was then that I decided to respond, not out of weakness, but out of choice. Because love, even when it comes to an end, leaves deep marks, some painful, others full of learning. And ignoring that message would be like denying an important part of my story. My answer was simple but sincere. Hi, I'm fine. What about you? The exchange of messages that followed was like a careful dive into waters that were familiar but still full of mysteries. He talked about the challenges he's faced since leaving, about how time has changed him in ways he didn't expect. And as we talked, I realized something surprising. We were no longer the same people. He was no longer the safe haven that supported me. And I was no longer the person who sought shelter from someone. Now, we were two individuals with intertwined histories, but who had learned to walk alone. But then, the inevitable question arises. Is there a second chance for love? Or are some stories better when they remain in the past? This doubt hovered over every word exchanged, every memory revived. And as he mentioned the possibility of us meeting, my mind went into conflict. Would this meeting be an opportunity to close cycles, or the risk of reopening wounds? What surprised me was realizing that, for the first time, the decision was mine. She wasn't driven by the fear of loneliness or the desperate longing she had before. It was a conscious choice, guided by who I became. And so, with my heart divided between the past and the future, I replied, "We'll see where this takes us. What comes next is still uncertain. But one thing I know, regardless of the outcome, I am prepared." Because in the end, the biggest learning from this journey was not about the love we shared, but about the strength I found within myself. Because sometimes the past comes back, not to hold us back, but to remind us of who we are now, stronger, more aware, and more prepared to move forward, whatever the path. What if, at the end of it all, the greatest lesson we learn is not about the love we had, but about who we became because of it? When I looked at it, after so long, I realized something that had previously escaped me. The past is a mirror, but the future is a blank canvas. Sitting across from each other, exchanging words full of memories and silences full of meaning, I finally understood that the story we lived together was an essential chapter, but not the entire book. talked about everything. The good things, the painful things, the things left unsaid. He admitted mistakes he had never acknowledged before, and I accepted mine too. And at that moment, something changed inside me. It wasn't about trying to recreate what we had lost, but about honoring what we experienced. So we did what we so often avoided. We said goodbye for real. Not as someone who sadly walks away, but as someone who is grateful for the time shared. There were no promises of a fresh start, no grandiose plans. Just a mutual understanding that we were both different people now. And that was a beautiful thing in itself. When he left, I didn't feel the emptiness I feared. I felt peace, because for the first time, what remained was not regret, but gratitude. And this is where the story ends. Or maybe it just really begins. I realized that the love we shared fulfilled the purpose it needed, teaching me the strength to lose myself and find myself. Show me that although goodbyes are painful, they can also be liberating. But the biggest lesson of all was this: love isn't about who you find or lose. It's about who you become along the way. Now, I leave this message for you who have followed this journey so far. And your path? Are you honoring who you were, who you are, and who you are becoming? Are you ready to let go of what needs to be let go and embrace what is to come? I invite you to reflect. Write in the comments how this story resonated with you. What did you learn from your goodbyes, with your new beginnings? Let's share these experiences, because deep down, we are all learning to navigate life's unexpected curves. If you liked this content, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who can identify with this message. Your participation helps this community grow and reach more people who, like you, are seeking inspiration and purpose in their stories. And don't forget, we're just getting started. In the next video, we'll explore how to turn moments of uncertainty into opportunities for growth and discovery. Stay tuned, because there is much more to come. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being part of this journey. Remember, every goodbye is a chance to be reborn, and every new beginning is a blank page ready to be written. Until the next chapter,